Goedemorgen allemaal. Zoals jullie hebben net gehoord, ik ben Jimmy. En ik spreek een soort pidgin Nederlands. En ik woon al eigenlijk lang genoeg in Nederland om beter Nederlands te kunnen spreken dan ik eigenlijk doe. Maar wat ik wil vanochtend of vanmiddag met jullie delen is extremely personal. En ik heb het een aantal keer geprobeerd in Nederlands, maar iedereen valt in slaap. Jullie hebben een keus. Optie A, in slaap te vallen. Of optie B, dat ik mag doorgaan in Engels. Oké, is English okay? Okay, Nederlands? Oké, meteen in slaap. Oké. Thank you. And secondly, it's an amazingly flattering invitation to be standing here today. And as a couple of you will know here, Emmanuel especially, I've been sort of talking now for the last little over a year and a half about what I've been doing recently. But I think there are very few more venues, as you'd probably agree with me, Emmanuel, that are more, you say in Dutch, geschikt for what I want to tell you this morning. Somebody earlier came up to me and said, "Hi, Jimmy, you're the photographer." And I sort of said, yes and no. This is not so much about photography, but it's very much about who I am. So please come with me on this journey, and I'll try and share that with you. To begin with, this is something that's become very familiar to us, and that's why it's utterly irrelevant to stand here today and call myself a photographer, because the whole world has become a photographer. My kids photograph every day. They attach GoPros to the heads of our dogs. They make films. I heard somebody said the other day, 1.5 billion pictures are being uploaded online every day at the moment. So the whole world, but on the other hand, that's fantastic. That means it's become this sort of global language, this global language of identity. Who the hell are you? And especially, who the hell am I when I'm making these pictures of ourselves and of myself? So on that note, I'm going to begin with a selfie. This is me. It sort of looks like a sort of happy, hairy version. But in actual fact, it's the complete opposite. Pictures do lie, beware. Everything in this picture that could have gone wrong is going wrong. It's about 4.5 years ago. I'm most especially freezing cold, minus 40 degrees centigrade, ring a bell. I'm lost, I'm disorientated, I'm sad, I'm depressed. And I remember, and it's not about vanity making this picture, but it was very much about remember this moment, remember the day when you bit off far more than you could chew and you became utterly stuck. And what was happening, I had set off on a journey, and it was a little bit of a naive journey. I wanted to go and photograph these people, the Satan, somewhere in northern Mongolia, in the depths of the winter, but I didn't want to make a reportage of them. I wanted to make a sort of an iconographic document, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. And I'd got there, and I'd sort of arrived sort of 2 weeks away from the valley where they live on top of a mountain. And I thought I'd been traveling the whole of my life, and I thought I was very smart. And I sort of came into the village, and I met you, and you were sitting in a cafe. And I said, I want to go to the Satan. And you spoke quite good English, and we were chatting away. And can you come with me? And you said, yeah, I'll come with you. I'd love to come with you. So we sort of made a deal, and how much is it going to cost? Oh, it's all right, I'll pay. And off we walked. I'm going to take you with me. And we spent 2 weeks walking up this valley, and it got cold and cold and cold, and we changed hands, got higher and higher and higher. And you can now go and sit down, because as you'll find out in a minute, I have no use for you. And then we sat down, and we got to the Satan, and there they were standing on the mountain. It was wild. It's very exciting when you've spent your whole life studying, researching, traveling, 2 weeks walking, and you're there. And I looked at you and I said, okay, it's your turn now. My cameras are ready. Talk to them. Tell them what I want. And you sort of looked at me and you went, it's going to be difficult. And I said, what do you mean it's going to be difficult? We spent 2 bloody weeks talking about this. And he said, yeah, but I don't know this dialect. And I said, what? You don't know this dialect? But yeah. And he says, yeah, I can't communicate with them. He said, you can't communicate to them. You've got 40 people standing on a mountain with all their reindeer. And you were sort of looking, and I said, well, who the hell is going to communicate with them? And you looked at me and said, I don't know. And I said, but what of all that money and that deal we made? And you said, yeah, I just needed your money. I wasn't going to tell you I didn't know this dialect. So I spent 2 weeks talking to this guy. We made amazing friends, but got to the Saturn and found out I couldn't talk to him. It's a serious issue. And these people didn't want to see me. They didn't know me. Most of them didn't even know what a camera was. So I'm standing next to you, my interpreter, which I paid all my last money to. And it's a complete dead end. So I thought, it's okay. I'll relax. It's okay. You've been here before. You can do it. Parked you, actually kicked you away. And so So for the next 2 weeks, I traveled with the Satan. And I thought, alles komt goed. And I walked with them. And they're nomads. And there are 40 of them. And they travel across the mountains. And they take their reindeer with them. And every night they build a camp and you all crawl in. But for 2 weeks, thanks to you, there was zero communication. And more importantly, for 2 weeks, there was zero pictures. I didn't make one picture or one film of them until that night. And that night of that selfie, and I'm sort of taking, where it's all, I've essentially given up. And I was actually crying. And I remember I've got to go back and sort of spent all my last pennies on this sort of grand, ambitious project, which is going to fail abysmally from day one. How the hell am I going to communicate this to my wife, who's on the edge of sort of running away from me anyway? And I remember when they put up this big teepee, and if you can imagine about this part of the room, all of us, the remaining Satan, we put up this massive teepee, and we'd all crawl in together. Now, nighttime comes, the reindeer go to sleep outside, you all crawl, and then the only way to keep warm in that teepee is using your arms and your legs and putting it each other's groins and armpits. You become sort of human sardines. So you crawl in, it's very, very close, and the wind's howling outside. And then what they do is they get out a bottle. And every evening, this sort of bottle traveled around the tents. And up until now, I'm a little bit of a prude, and I'm not very good with alcohol. But this bottle was like a sort of a jet fuel. And I'd sort of abstained. I thought, well, I'm on my mission. I'm on my mission to take my pictures and got to concentrate and be sober. But on that last night, that night of the selfie, I thought, well, I've got nothing to lose anymore. Nothing's going to happen tomorrow. I just have to leave. So I had a sip, and magic happened. And I use this sort of rather childish analogy of, if you ever worn a wetsuit and jumped into cold water and then had a pee? It's that amazing feeling where you're going, oh, wow, and you sort of float there for a minute, sort of indulging, sort of releasing your bowels. And this, you know, for the first time in weeks, a little bit of a sort of smirk of a smile came onto my face. Oh, this is not so bad, you know, I'll have another sip. And the inevitable happened. I sort of I fell into a sort of an alcoholic coma on the floor of the tent. I think I finished the whole bottle, but it didn't really matter because I had nothing to do. There was no communication. Nothing was going to happen anyway. So sort of fast asleep. I didn't feel guilty. I think the whole tent was drunk, including some of the kids. So we're all lying there with arms and legs sort of entwined. And in the middle of the night, there's a slight technical problem. And it's not very complicated. I'm sure some of you use your sort of wide imagination can imagine what that is. I needed a pee. And so I sort of sat up, the tent started spinning, the wrong way around. And I thought, well, if I stand up now, this is going to be a disaster. I'll sort of stumble across the tent, stumble on the Satan. I can't have that. You know, I'm English, got to keep up my appearances. I'm in control, everything's fine. I thought, but you know what? I'm now extremely smart because I'm drunk. So what I'm going to do is I'm roll like a crab over these 40 Satan in the middle of this tent, in the middle of this blizzard, get to the side of the tent, which I did, and I got there. I thought, it's amazing. I checked up, they're still all fast asleep, snoring away. It's okay. Took off my glove, first big mistake of the day, and I put my hand on the tent to lift it up because I'm not going to go outside because that's how smart I am. Leant outside and my hand stuck to the side of the tent. So I thought, slight technical problems. I've got another hand. And then I looked down and realized there are 33 layers of Beversport clothing. And I'm looking there, frozen to a tent, surrounded by 40 sleeping drunk Satan. One hand frozen, and the other hand desperate to get to my sort of nether region. I'm going, oh, you know, how do you end up in these situations? And whilst I'm sort of sitting there, the inevitable happened. It all went everywhere, and over me and over the tent, and sort of lay there, stuck to this tent in the middle of the night. Can anything get worse? No. So I sort of, empty bowel, everybody still fast asleep, so it was actually okay. And sort of rolled back and sort of fell into this slumber until sort of serious drama ensued a few minutes later. The tent was stampeded over by reindeer. Now, this was obviously made in a day before or after. There were more than 60 reindeer outside who decided for one reason or other to go over this tent. So you got 40 drunk, this is like sort of Monty Python now on steroids, imagine. 40 drunk sat, and the tent gets dragged off us. We get trampled on by reindeer. Everybody stands up drunk, falls on each other. It starts screaming. It's the middle of the night. There's a blizzard blowing. It's absolute pandemonium. And I'm sort of walking around going, oh, this is a dream, bad dream, bad dream, bad dream. And I start looking in front of me, and the oddest thing happens. One after another, the reindeer start to sort of collect in front of me, and they start looking at me. And as you can see, they've got antlers on, and they're sort of fairly sort of wild animals. And they start looking at me, they start coming towards me, and they start trying to lick me. So I'm sort of still thinking this is a dream and it's okay, I'm in control, and I'm sort of backing up towards the edge of the thing. And before I know it, I'm standing on top of the hill, a good 50 meters away from the Satan, surrounded by reindeer trying to lick me, and behind me there's a cliff. So I'm sort of looking over. I thought, this is not funny anymore. This is a very, very, very serious problem. So I started screaming. I don't think I've ever screamed so hard in all my life. I mean, screaming for essentially life. I can hardly see it. I'm screaming and screaming and screaming. Then all of a sudden, we've gone a little bit far. All of a sudden, you saw a minute ago a picture of a chief. He sort of looked at me. And he could see me, but rather than coming to me, he put his hand on his hip, bent over double, and nudged his friends, and the whole of a sudden burst out laughing. So I'm surrounded by 40 reindeer, the tent's gone somewhere, and there's 40 Saturn down on the hill, screaming with laughter, looking at me. And I'm saying, yeah, how the hell can you, I'm about to die, you know. So eventually he sort of came up, and he sort of pushed the reindeer away, and he sort of came up to me, and with no words, he was laughing and laughing. He started pointing at my groin, and I'm sort of going, everything's fine, I don't know what you're pointing at. And then he turns around and he bangs his backside like this. And on his back, there's this big, big leather pouch. And I sort of looked at it and he sort of, gesticulated. You haven't noticed this before. And then all the Saturn turned around and went like this. And they're all carrying this leather pouch attached to them. And I had no idea what it was. Had never asked, had not properly observed. So I looked at it. He took it off and put it under my nose. And it smelt of urine. And so I'm sort of retched a bit like this. He put it down and he started smiling. They all started smiling and nodding, took off their pouches like this as if to say, what does that have to do with me, pouches smelling of urine? So anyway, the long story was that he explained that they collect their own urine in these pouches. And this is how they gather the reindeer, because the reindeer need salt. And the only salt they're ever going to get is from this urine, because 12 months of the year it's ice and snow. And as I had not noticed, we'd spent 2 weeks whilst I was in my sort of semi-depression, walking behind them across them, spreading their own urine into the snow, hence why the reindeer followed them. And so I sort of kind of vaguely understood this. And I said, but why didn't you give me a leather pouch in the beginning? And they all laughed and said, you didn't tell us you pee your pants. So, but what was very, very beautiful, they found the tent, they put it back up, put me in the middle of the tent, everybody's screaming with laughter, all the old ladies with their special, extra strong bottles of vodka presenting it to me. But an enormous amount of laughter ensued. Very, very special. And what happened the next day, there was, for the first time in weeks, without any language at all, a sort of contact. But the contact came out of being vulnerable. That came out of making mistakes, out of being humble. And it was very, very beautiful. And eventually I stayed with them for another 2 weeks, still without you, the interpreter. But I did find a form of communication through humility. And I managed eventually to start taking pictures of them, putting them on a pedestal. And I will talk more about that in a minute. But it's a very important story, this now, as to why I'm there. This is me. It's very personal, so hold on. This is me when I was 7 years old. I grew up traveling around the world. My father worked for Shell. At the age of 7, they said, kostschool, oops, okay. 10 months of the year with 400 Jesuit priests. Not all of them priests, but that's another story. And they claimed they were priests. They had the uniform and everything. I got to the age of 16. I'd seen a lot of the world, but a little bit sad, to be honest, a little bit lonely. And I was ill. I had cerebral malaria, and my parents said, vacation's finished, off you go back to those that are happy priests. And I arrived, and I sort of went up to them and said, I'm ill. And they said, well, alles komt goed. If you take this pot of pills, you'll wake up in the morning and everything will be fine. And this is how I woke up the next morning. And if you want to talk a story about identity, it doesn't get more profound than this. I woke up, my hair had fallen out in 12 hours, and it lay in the bed. I was surrounded by my hair, and I looked in the mirror, and I met somebody else. Now, as my kids say, Dad, you don't have to keep sharing that stupid story about you being bald. You're just old. And I said, I know. Half of Amsterdam has no hair at my age. But when you're 16, and you live in an institution where everybody looks the same and everybody acts the same, and you're confronted by somebody else when you look in the mirror. It's a mind-boggling experience. I mean, I have teenagers now, and if one hair is out of place, the house gets turned upside down, let alone losing every hair on your head. So you present yourself in the mirror and say, well, I can deal with that, until you look at the masses of people around you, and they start treating you in a completely different way. And I said, but how on earth, I'm still Jimmy. I'm still the Jimmy that went to bed the night before with a head full of hair. And the whole room said, no. You've become somebody else. I mean, without being blunt, what a load of bollocks. I was exactly the same person as the day before, but my whole environment treated me as somebody else. So I was livid. I was absolutely livid. So a year later, I ran away. I ran away from everybody, from my institution, from my parents, from everybody that I knew. And I dressed and I went to the one part in the world inspired by Tintin, where I knew I could find other little boys with no hair, and that was Tibet. It had nothing to do with anthropology, nothing to do with ethnology, nothing to do with exploration. It was just running away, trying to find empathy with people that perhaps could look like me. I spent a year there. I walked from one end to the other, met some extraordinary people, had some extraordinary experiences, and thanks to Tintin, came back and began to set myself onto a journey. An extraordinary journey that, in many ways, was inspired by this man. And if any of you are interested in photography, there's a little bit about photography. This guy's Edward Sheriff Curtis. He is 150 years ago, he spent 30 years of his life traveling around the Native American West. I've made one book, amazing, but he made 30 of the most extraordinary books documenting every single Native American Indian culture that existed. And he screamed and he screamed and he screamed, look at these people, look at these icons, look at this culture, look at what they stand for, look at how rich we are. And 150 years later, these people don't exist anymore. 99% of the images were destroyed. Almost every single book was burnt. He died in shame. But recently, these pictures began to reemerge, and contemporary American culture gasped. They put their hand over their mouth and said, look at what we've lost. Inspired by him, I've sort of set off on my own journey. A journey to look at the world's last indigenous cultures, look at these tribes and put them on a pedestal, to show them to you in a light that perhaps you haven't seen before, and to talk about them. Now, it is not reportage photography, it's not journalism, it's not the National Geographic, it's an artistic, subjective, romantic, idealistic, passionate, in some cases, autistic interpretation of who these people are and what they look like and what they could say to us. So I published a book about a year and a half ago, very naive, to be honest, and these pictures were made from talking about a very, very deep passion, but the consequences of them I didn't truly understand until something happened. The modern media took over, and the pictures and the story was published in plus or minus about 7,500 publications around the world in little less than half a year. And on the strength of that, the whole world came to me, and they started saying, Jimmy, who are these people? How many are these people? Where are these people? This is fake. And to be honest, Jimmy, who the hell are you to have made these pictures in the first place and show them to us and say what you think? And I've never been so confronted in all my life, but it's wildly exciting. We were talking a few minutes ago about how you take risks and how you dare to fail. I'd created something from my gut, not knowing the consequences, that presented it unintentionally to the world, and the whole world came to me and started challenging me. What on earth is this all about? What on earth is this all about? And next to that, who the hell are you without any form of education to say anything about it? Well, I'm going to share that with you now. And it went so far, there's a couple of amusing anecdotes here. We had a Facebook page, which became very popular very quickly. Until one day, the girls I was working with panicked. Oh, Jimmy, we've been banned from Facebook. You're being accused of tribal pornography. So this was a post that went to tribal pornography. I said, anyway. And then it went even further. And this is one of the accusations, Jimmy Nelson's wrong-headed obsession with vanishing indigenous cultures. Okay, well, I'm Jimmy, that's right. Obsession, I have to admit it is, and I'm fairly obsessive about most, but wrong-headed is far from. And this is what I'm going to share with you now. Please, Manuel, I need you a minute if you come up here. I'm going to tell you a story. It's a very simple story. Everybody says, but Jimmy, all these stories, and how the hell do you make these pictures? How the hell, if your translators don't speak, do you make this picture? Well, this is how it is. It's very simple. It's a little bit of theater. But so Manuel, for all intents and purposes, is a cannibal, okay? And Manuel has lots of friends, and they all look like Manuel. They're all very strong, and they all have these penis sheaths, and they stand around. And Manuel and his friends do not want me there. They find me very threatening. They don't even understand what photography is. So very, very, very quickly, I have to persuade Manuel and his friends that I'm absolutely nothing. So I essentially become a dog. Luckily, my wife gathered a lot of pets over the last few years. I've learned what animals do. And I have to make myself very small, very humble, very vulnerable, and essentially say to you and all your friends, you are the boss. You are the most, and whatever you want to do with me, including to eat me, you can do that. So you invert the power immediately. Traditionally, we walk around with all our cameras and our lenses and our computers and our entourage and our assistants. You've got to invert it and put you on the pedestal. And then what happens is very exciting. You sit for a day, two, in some cases a week. You get kicked, you get shouted at, you get spat on, you get even peed on occasions. And you sit and you sit and you sit, and then eventually they get bored. they get very bored and everybody starts to leave. But there's one person invariably left over, and that could be, in this case, Manuel. And Manuel's sort of standing there, and he starts looking at me because he's a little bit more curious. This is perhaps a little bit more behind this sort of eccentric sort of bald person from another valley than meets the eyes. So we start looking at each other, and I make sure that I'm smaller than Manuel the whole time. I start sort of sidling up to Manuel, and I start looking at him, and then I come up to him and I touch you in the arm, and I go, oh, wow, you're strong. Jesus. And it doesn't matter what language you use, but if you've come from low and you really start to worship, and I really think these people are extraordinarily beautiful, and you're standing there going, Jesus, how do you do? Oh, wow, just wait there. If you sit up straight, sit your back. Oh, amazing. Oh, you're incredible. Lift your chin. Oh, and you start this whole worshipping process. And then eventually I've got this camera, and I use these old plate film cameras. They're about 50 years old, and they're very slow, they're very cumbersome, and I use the analogy often. It's a little bit like being Mr. Bean. Everything goes wrong, and you stick and you pee, but through that process, you start to communicate and show who you really are. And I start building this camera and putting it on a tripod, coming backwards and forwards, and this is, 40 degrees centigrade, and I'm sweating, and I'm blind, and I'm bumping into, sorry, stay still, you're amazing. And then and eventually Manuel realizes that I'm starting to worship him, but he does not know what the camera is. And we're looking at each other. They go, wait, it's amazing. Oh, but there's a problem. It's a problem. You're ready. But there's not enough light, and it's dark, and I need help. Shit. So I run over here and I grab you, and you come back, and you've got to be quick because the light's going. You stand there, watch out for that. You stand there, and I'm going to have a reflector, and I open the reflector, and I grab the sun. You say, you've got to stand there. No, you're big. Yeah, like, you see the way the sun's coming up there? You've got to shine it on Manuel's face. Stay still, don't move. I need somebody else's help. You've got to come as well, yeah. But you see the shadows down here, you've got to get low. And then whoops, okay, like that, yeah. Then you see the shadows here, and there's something on his nose. I need somebody else. Quickly. Okay, and you sit right down there. Get as low as you can. You see the little shadow up there? And then before you know it, you have the whole village holding reflectors. And Manuel's standing there, and he's getting stronger, and his chest is getting bigger, and he's getting wise, and he's starting to breathe through your nose. You're special. And then the whole time, I'm going backwards and forwards. But the thing is, the sun moves. It's not like a normal studio. So the whole time, the sun, oh, Jesus, you've got to get that there, and you've got to come in, stay still. Don't concentrate. You're not using your arms there. And then before you know, you've got 30 people, this whole village standing around Manu, who's now actually really beginning to enjoy it. And then you get behind your camera, and then I need 5 seconds for the shutter speed because the light is so reflective, it's so soft, but so gentle. I teach you, 5 seconds, okay? Shh. I put the film in and we count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if he hasn't moved and I put the plate back in, I got the picture, it's amazing. And then I come up and then you start calling me and we start bumping up and down. It's an amazing picture. And then what's very exciting, everybody gets excited and everybody's knocking up and down. And then all of a sudden somebody else comes and goes, look at, and then this goes on and on. You can go, and thank you. And what happens is it's about seeing somebody. It's very, very simple. I think these people are extraordinary. I think they're very beautiful. They're very powerful. They have things to share with us, things to show with us. And if you sort of go on that very vulnerable journey, if you dare sit on the floor for a week being spat on, being kicked at, to eventually photograph them and document them like you've dreamed of doing that, you do make a connection. Now, there's no great philosophical conversation, but you do make a human connection. I see them and they see me. And also on that journey of, it's a bit of a film, take a breath. And again, I haven't discovered anything, and I've not done anything that hasn't been done before. But in this particular case, I really am seeing them. And somebody the other day was looking through the book and they said, Jimmy, I don't really care about tribes and I'm not really interested in photography, but every picture touches me. I have a feeling that every person in that picture is looking at me. Well, that is true. I've spent hours and hours and hours on my knees, sweating, freezing, trying to make those people look into the camera, to look through the camera, to look out of the camera, and eventually to look at you. So that is the connection. But ultimately, if you're talking about identity, I'm trying to get them to look at me. Look at me for who I am, not necessarily what I look like and what I could mean to you. And then you've made those personal contacts and you've got to know all the individuals, not necessarily by name, but by touching and by putting on a pedestal, and they say, come, 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 there's this amazing waterfall on top of the valley up here. So you sometimes walk for a day and you go further and further and further, and they truly understand, and you stand there. It may take 2 or 3 days because you're waiting for the light, waiting for the mist, waiting for that moment, and they stand there in all their glory and all their pride, and you have no idea how exciting this is. If you've been trying to spend your life connecting with people, to end up with 5 cannibals under a waterfall 2 days away from their village, and they stand there holding their fists with their chest out in this most extraordinary sort of avatar-esque setting, which enables you to make a picture something like this. And it's about that one picture, it's about that one moment, it's about that sort of foreplay of the journey of meeting and meeting, putting them on the pedestal, trying to find that sort of visual perfection of power. And it was 6 or 7 years ago, that film Avatar by James Cameron, I think a little bit longer, it's earned more than $1.5 billion in the worldwide film box office. No more film made more money. And it's essentially this. Okay, they're yellow as opposed to blue, they're real as opposed to animated, but it's exactly the same story. There are people and there are places still on the planet that are wildly valuable and wildly special and very, very important to us. And I'm going to tell you another story now. This is a very strange place. This is my favorite hoolie. It reminds me of Robin Williams and Mrs. Doubtfire. Not that every time I look at this picture, it's so great. Anyway, I dreamed as a child, and this journey is going on for many, many years. I wanted to meet an Eskimo. And as the years have been going on, I sort of saw the sort of Eskimos as we perceive them disappearing. They're still there, but they sort of wear those 8 layers of Beaversport clothing. But there's one place left on the planet where they still do exist. That is Chukotka. Now, Chukotka is probably the most remote part of the planet. It's a 13-hour flight from Moscow, and that's if you sort of get there safely. And I wanted to meet the Chukchi. This time I had found somebody online who lived in the town. We were sending emails for 4 years. One day I want to come and meet you. Can you take me to the Chukchi? And he says, yeah. So I went and I landed, got there, and there he was at the airport, beautifully handsome. And I said, where are they? Where are they? I've got 3 weeks. And he sort of looked at me and he goes, oh yeah, Jimmy, I forgot to tell you, it's going to be difficult. And I said, difficult? I like difficult. It'll be okay. And he goes, yeah. He says, but I don't really know where they are. And I said, what? You don't know where they are? I spent the whole of my life waiting for this moment, And he said, yeah, I don't really know where they are, but it'll be okay. But did you realize how big Chukotka was? And I said, sort of, it's as big as France. It's okay. And how many Chukchi are there left? There are 40. And they're nomads and they move. So, okay, yeah, but you knew I was coming. For the last 4 years, we've had contact, online, mail. So, yeah, I knew. I just needed you to come here. I needed the work. Oh, Jesus. Okay, but let's say I come with you. How are we going to do it? He said, well, it's easy. My brother has a tank. We can carry 2 months of diesel fuel with us, and we're going to go off across the ice. Yeah, and then what? He said, well, we're going to follow the reindeer. Oh, no, reindeer, And he goes, no. And he looks at me and thinks, well, this guy's stranger than I thought, And he says, it's very easy. We find the reindeer droppings, and I can look by the age and the distribution. I can follow them across the ice. But the only thing is, I don't know how long it's going to take. It may take a week, it may take a month. But you have a choice. You can either come or you can't come. So we went, as you can see from the pictures. I took Bram with me, my cameraman. This is how we'd wake up every morning. This is minus 20 in the tank. And then 31 days later, so 31 days living with Brum in a tank with minus 20 degrees centigrade, we came over a mountain. Now, I kind of lost the plot at this stage, so I was sort of a little bit vulnerable. And in the distance, we came over, 31 days later, we saw this. Now, this is Manhattan. You have no idea how this tent felt. It was wild, exciting. So we sort of came over the mountain. They were having a picnic, and then next to the picnic was this beautiful man sitting there in this outfit, and he was my antithesis of a sort of an iconographic Eskimo, and he was sitting there. I said, oh no, Jimmy, project before the camera's handsome, breathe in, sit up, I haven't got time to get to know you. I've got to get back. I've been away for 1.5 months. And he sort of looked at me, and they all came around me, and they looked at me, and he raised his fingers, and he said the one word of Russian I understood, "Niet." I said, "Niet? What do you mean, niet?" And he said, well, through the translator, because you could communicate this time, thank you very much. He said, you can't do anything, but you're willing to stay with us. We would like to have you here. But we don't want any pictures or any film. It has nothing to do with stealing our soul or our identity. It has to do with time and temperature and fragility. So we spent 2 weeks living with them, 2 weeks living with them. But for the very first time, I started to observe things that I don't have time to share them with you now. Fantastic balance of how a culture of 40 people living on the edge of the world in these extreme situations live, survive, and have a pride. And then just towards the end, the last 2 days, they said you could start taking pictures, these of which you see. And I said, why on earth are you here? You're obviously intelligent people. And they said, we've chosen to be here. 3 years ago, we lived there. A couple of years prior to that, the Russian authorities came to us and said, the Chukchis, it's lovely, lovely, but it's, time has moved on. We don't need ethnic cultures anymore. So we're going to subsidize you, we're going to sponsor you, we're going to move you to the city. They didn't have the objectivity, they didn't know. So they left, they abandoned everything and they moved up here. 6 months later, I remember him sitting there and he said, somebody came with a big clipboard and walked into us and said, he looked down at us and he said, you look unhappy. And he looked and they all looked at each other and they didn't understand. They didn't have the word happiness in their vocabulary. He said, unhappy? What is unhappy? He said, well, it's this, 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 and this. And they said, well, okay, that's a new word. We are unhappy because we don't do anything anymore. We have no purpose. We have no function. We spend all day sitting down. We watch television all day. We don't see the elders. We have zero contact with one another and zero pride. So that chief who you saw, who waved a finger at me saying, Net, said, we're going back. And they literally went back. They went back to their traditions and their culture. So there they were at the end of the world and where we met them. And obviously it was a long journey coming back, so time to think. And I thought, this is absolutely fantastic. You have no idea. Now, I'm not telling you all to take your clothes off today and put on fur and run off with a group of reindeers into the ice. But what I am telling you is that these people, because they are so in touch with who they are, so in touch with their identity, their culture, the tradition, the nature they live in, the nature which 24 hours of the day is trying to kill them, they really know what they feel. They really know their identity. And subsequently, they can really make the decisions that matter to them. Here we sit today in this extraordinary church, in this amazing culture, which I choose to live in. But often we're very, very far removed because we're protected, we're isolated from what we truly feel. And this last story I'm going to share with you is about feeling to the nth degree. And perhaps that's what this whole story is about identity and who am I and who are the people that I meet and what it actually means to me. This is Mongolia again, northwestern Mongolia. These are the Kazakhs. Beautiful people, wild people, extraordinarily photogenic. And you can imagine prior to going here, this is where I wanted to go. These were the people I wanted to photograph. This tradition of, as children entering manhood, they scale cliffs without ropes, get these baby eagles. These eagles become 30 kilos. They have 5-meter wingspans and they hunt with them across these majestic landscapes. So the whole process of a few weeks making portraits until eventually one morning I said, please, 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 we've got to go on top of the valley. We've got to go up here. So they came with me, as they invariably do. And there we're standing on top of the mountain, looking down through the valley. This is it. This is what I want to photograph. This is a painterly, majestic, extraordinary landscape. And it truly is. When you see a print of this framed, it's wildly stunning. But it didn't work the first morning. There was no sunrise. Now, I'm a little bit of an eccentric, and as I explained, a little bit autistic. This wasn't the image I wanted to make. It was very dark, a bit rainy, so I said, we're not going to make the picture. So we went down, very confused, spent the whole day, please, can we go up again tomorrow morning, please? And they sort of reluctantly came up with me the next morning, stood there, the same thing happened, put up the tripod, the stupid old camera, look, no sunrise. Should I make the picture? And one side of me said, just sort of Photoshop a sky and later and change the contrast. Alles kommt gut. But the other side, that very deep personal passion, this isn't the picture I want to make. It's not the real picture of how it really is. So we went down, but they spent the whole day going, niet, we're not coming up with you again. So I started crying and I said, please, you don't know how important this picture is for me. I dragged them up, actually brutally the third morning. And we're standing there. The sun starts to rise. It's exciting. I'm overly exhausted, extremely emotional. If you can see, I've been standing here for the last 20 minutes and I've lost my breath. Imagine how it is after 3 days walking up and down this mountain. And I was about to put on a big sort of wig. Anyway, and we're standing there. I put up the tripod, and the sun's about to rise. This is it. You have no idea. And so looking through the camera and focusing, and oh shit, I've got the wrong lens on. So I took off my gloves and go to take the lens off. Now the lenses are attached to a metal plate. Start fiddling with it, and eventually, for one reason, I stick to this plate. It's minus 20 degrees centigrade. It's a little bit cold. Then I sort of standing there and they start, thumbs up, you can make the picture now. And I go, I can't, I'm stuck to the camera. And then you have another one of these sort of out-of-body experiences. Oh, Jimmy, why didn't you just make it easy for yourself? And you're stuck, oh no, I've got to let go. And again, so I pull my fingers off this camera and I leave all the skin behind. They start to bleed. It's like somebody's hitting you with a hammer. I start looking and I realize I can't function anymore. It starts to hurt, and then I started to cry. And I literally sort of sat on this rock, and I was sort of sobbing and banging my fingers to get feeling back into them and looking, seeing the sunrise and seeing, this, why be so utterly eccentric? Why go to these extremes? There are 10 times easier ways to achieve what you need to achieve. Now, whilst I was sitting there, they waved to me and they said, look behind you. And behind me came two of, not this lady, but two of these glorious, big, proud, beautiful, middle-aged, wide Mongolian women covered in fur. And they sort of waddled up to me, sort of grumbling. One of them grabbed me, opened her jacket, and put my hands on her breast. Armpits, breast, somewhere. Wasn't quite focusing at that time. Not that that matters to me, but... and I sort of leant into her, and then the other lady opened her jacket, and they grabbed me, and my sort of legs buckled, and I sort of started crying for other reasons, but... and then there were sort of two forms of emotion sort of mingling into one big sort of mush, but I quite enjoyed it, to be honest. And so hanging there, sort of hanging, 3 or 4 minutes later, feeling came back into my fingers, and I start thinking, picture, picture, picture. I described as a bit autistic. Picture, picture, picture. So I just wandered back to my camera, pushed these ladies away, very un-English of me, didn't say thank you. Had the one sheet of film, threw it into the camera, and I made the pitch you just saw. Great, until a few minutes sort of walking down the mountain, what really happened was perhaps what should have been happening, what I've been looking to happen for years and years and years and years. There we were standing on a mountain, this sort of abstract process of making pictures. But what really happened was a group of people saw me. I spent weeks on my knees, crying, laughing, putting them on a pedestal, not being able to talk to them. But what they did decide, they're Muslims, yeah? Now, they're not in any way fundamentalists, but Islam is very much part of their culture. And there are some people here today, or many of you, who know what that means. You, first of all, don't look at women. Yeah, or it's as a foreigner. But you're never encouraged by the men to put your hands on them. And I truly believe what happened there on that mountain was a meeting of human beings, stripping away judgment, stripping away appearance, stripping away class, language, culture, color, you name it, it all disappeared. There was somebody, this sort of odd, bald Mr. Bean, failing abysmally on top of a mountain. They decided, just go and help him. Just go and help him. And what mattered to me was this was what it all is about, how we see each other. When you go to that extreme, now, you don't all have to go to the extremes I do, but there is a way of seeing each other that goes wildly beyond any barriers of culture, class, race, color. Next picture. Okay, here's a little bit of making of. It's beautiful there. Oh, if any of you love traveling and if you want to experience, you have to go. The Altai Mountains in far northwestern Mongolia. And these people are warm, these people are gracious, these people are proud. And they literally have, when you talk about possessions, they have nothing. They have the skin on their backs, they have the horses and their eagles. But these are some of the wildest, strongest, most majestic people I've ever, and making a picture of them like I do doesn't do any percentage of justice to how they truly are. And here I'm moaning and complaining.
Okay.
And this picture is a build-up. This is in another village later on, a build-up of days, waiting for the light, waiting for the moment as it's just setting on them. And then there they stand in all their pride.
Okay, thank you.
When I finished part 1 of the project about 1.5 years ago, I started feeling very guilty. I started feeling I've taken something and the circle is only half complete. I have to start taking back. So when the world started coming to me, Jimmy, who are you? Who are you? And I said, well, you're right to confront me in a way. I have taken something and it's my duty to take it back. So television production companies started ringing, Jimmy, we'd love to take you. So I started going back and I've started doing that now. And I went back here to the Himba in northern Namibia, on the border of Angola. Now, 99.99% of the traditional Himba don't live there anymore. They've all moved to the cities. In 2050, if I'm right in saying, 95% of us will all live in cities. So the Himba, like a lot of the tribes and cultures I photographed, are the last group that still exist in their natural habitat. So we went back, a little bit different this time with a couple of drones, and but very, very beautiful and very humbling. You walk back into the village and they look at you and they look at you and they see you and they start pointing, not because you peed your pants, but he came back. And then we sort of sat down and they said, we've been filmed before, we've been photographed before, but nobody has ever given us the dignity of giving back what they took. And then you sort of humbly accept that. And then we ended up sitting down and I took the book with me and started showing them the book and showing them the pictures and the pride. You have no idea. I mean, it brings tears to my eyes to see them, their backs straight and their eyes light up. They recognize themselves and go, that's me. They've never seen themselves before. and then the whole community comes together, and then you finish the chapter on the Himba, and you turn over the next page, and you come to the Chukchi, and they jump, and they say, what's this? It's snow, it's Siberia, it's the other part of the world, but there are other groups on the planet that are as spectacular as you, are as valuable as you, have the wealth that you have, a wealth that we don't have anymore, but have extreme contact with themselves, with their cultures, with their traditions, and the environment that they live in. You are very, very, very special people. So this comment here, you're sitting down with them and seeing the light in their eyes when they recognize themselves is spectacular. And then this was one journey. This was with Germans, so this was very sort of in control. And a few weeks later, a group of Americans rang me from CNN. Hi, Jimmy, my name's Bob. Hi, Bob. Where would you like to go? And I said, oh, lovely, nice compliment. I'd like to go back to Vanuatu. Where's Vanuatu? And I said, well, it's in the Pacific somewhere. Well, let's go. Meet you in Sydney. So off I went, and we sort of flew down to Sydney, and there were 6 Bobs standing next to each other, actually 12, although 6 human beings, but looked like 12 people. And so I'm a little bit, oh, Jesus, Jimmy, you've gone too far now. This isn't what it's all about. It's about intimacy, it's about respect, it's about humility, and you're now traveling with an entourage. But I decided, no, it's important I return, it's important I film and I share. So off we went back to, this is the Yakel and the island of Tanna. And the very first thing, these Bobs, we sort of got off out of the vehicle, and they, Jesus, they're all naked, film them. So out come these drones, and I'm really thinking, no, I've got it wrong. And sort of calmed them down, re-educated them for a few days. Came back, and it all became calmer. They started to film, we started to share the same stories, until the chief said, come, you have to have a picture with us. We had a good translator. So I remember sort of sitting in this tree, not this one here, but sitting in this tree here, with the book, sitting next to the chief, and we're all sitting there very proud. Even I'm sitting up straight with my back, and the chief sort of looks at me, and we're about to make the picture, and he leans over, and the whole tree starts to murmur a little bit like an avatar, and he leans forward, and he goes, there's a problem. I go, yeah, problem. He said, there's a big problem. And the soldier, and I said, oh no, I've done it this time. The Bobs have all disappeared, but there's a problem. And he said, you gave me a book. And I said, yeah, I gave you a book. He said, yeah, but there's a big problem. I said, but what's the problem? He said, yeah, when does the rest of the village get their books? And there are 80 people in the village. So if anybody wants to come with me to Vanuatu again, and as long as you're not called Bob, please get in touch, okay? They need to have 79 books delivered as quickly as possible. Okay, this last story is a bit of an anecdote, and it's a little bit, what I'm trying to do is explain, I'm standing here in a pair of jeans and a shirt, much the same as you. Who am I to share and show these things? Well, as much as identity and observation matters with Manuel in the middle of Papua New Guinea, it matters as importantly at home. I've been traveling. I've been away, but I have children. I have a family, just. And when they were small, they were amazing. Everybody listened to me, and they followed me, and I put them on elephants and in cactuses, and I painted them, and they were my little tribe. And until things began to change recently, they became teenagers. And teenagers sort of have a bit of a change of opinion. This is my son. I love him dearly. His name is Narush, but he's 16. A few months ago, we were on holiday. My wife said to me at the end of the holiday, Jimmy, I'm staying on holiday for a few weeks. I said, staying on holiday? And if you know me, know my wife. I said, yeah, she said, you've been finding yourself with all the tribes. I found myself with a yoga instructor. I said, found yourself Dutch, very open, very, I said, yeah, okay, yeah, how's that going to be? She said, I need to get back in touch with my body, and everything will be okay. And he said, you'll be fine. You can reconnect with the kids on your own. Off you go to Amsterdam. So I was a little bit nervous about this new arrangement. So I thought, well, it's a modern world, It's only yoga. It'll be okay. It'll be okay. It's only yoga. The fact that he was 26, black and tattooed, it's only yoga. Not important. And if any of you are interested, have a look in Jan magazine next month. It's not a lie. And so I sort of go back home, but I'm not getting on very well with my son, and he's become goth. And he's disappeared, and 3 days into coming back into Amsterdam, I'm trying to ring him, he doesn't pick up, and I'm panicking, I'm sweating, and my youngest daughter, who's smarter than I will ever be, comes up to me and says, Dad, are you trying to find Narush? And I said, yeah, I've lost him. Where is he? And she says, well, it's because you haven't connected with him. I said, no, help me. She said, should we ring Mum? No, don't ring Mum. I'm in control. Everything's fine. I'm in control. Don't ring Mum. And she said, well, I've got an idea. He's become goth. Do you know what goth is? I said, yeah, well, he wants everything in black. Why don't we go to IKEA tonight? We can have a bit of a meal and then buy him something for his room. I said, good idea, find him. So that night we drove off, headphones in, hat on, and I'm grumbling away. Half an hour into IKEA, I went up to him begging, what's wrong? Why don't you communicate? And he looked at me and he said, it's too much color here. I want black. You don't understand me. And walked off. So I sat down, much the same way as sitting down on the top of the mountain with my frozen fingers. I sort of gave in and ready to ring my wife, not wanting to interrupt on her yoga lesson. And my youngest daughter came up to me and she said, Dad, look what I found. And I said, yeah, what on earth do multicolored brushes have to do with me? He said, do you remember when we were babies and we used to stick those things on your head? We used to hit them from side to side. I said, if I stick this on your head now, look what happens. So she stuck it on my head, and within 3 minutes, 4, meneer, mag ik dat ook doen? You know. And I sat there with all this, again, sitting on this air, laughing in my stupidity, and, you know, spent a lifetime worrying about what people look like and what I look like, and people thinking, actually sitting there, completely giving up on this floor in IKEA. But guess what happened? Guess who comes out of the cupboard? My son comes out, takes his hat off, his headphones out, he's sidling, walks past me, bang, he takes a picture and he walks off. Still no contact, until 3 days later, I'm sitting crying in my study, and bang goes the door, and bang, 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 he runs upstairs. Dad, something's happened. What, Mum, no yoga? No, it's nothing to do with Mum. Look, and he shoved his iPhone in my face. I said, whoa, what? He said, look, I got 1.5 million likes. 1.5 million likes. Well, what have I done? What have I done something wrong? Have they really found me? No. It's me. I made this picture of you in IKEA the night, and I wrote underneath, the perks of being bald and bored in IKEA, and I put it on 9gag. I've got letters from thousands of people around there. Who are you? What is? It's amazing. It's so exciting. I'm so popular. And he says, I've got one thing to ask you. And I said, yeah, anything. You can do anything. And he said, tomorrow, all my friends in my class want to come for dinner. I mean, I know you can't cook. It doesn't matter. We'll get something from somewhere. Even get one of my sisters to do it. But they desperately want to come, and with you and me, we're going to tell them how they can make connection online. We can do that, can't we? We can do that. Because I'm the most popular guy in Amsterdam Zuid. And I said, yes. So the next night, 30 kids came, 30 teenagers sitting around a table, all discussing how you communicate online. And I thought the beauty of it was, there I am, halfway around the world, trying to communicate with claiming to be able to communicate with cannibals in Papua New Guinea, completely losing contact at home, until again you let go, until again you become vulnerable, you become fallible, you end up sitting on the floor of IKEA on a busy Thursday, wet afternoon, looking like some sort of tribal leader with IKEA brushes stuck to your head. And indirectly, I make recontact with my son. Childish story, but true. I'm going to leave you with one last picture. And this is, if you want about identity, this is perhaps the answer for me. This is not my favorite picture, but a colleague of mine said, Jimmy, if you talk, show that picture of the Nenet in Siberia. I said, why? He said, well, look in his eyes. I started looking in his eyes, and there's a picture of me in his eyes, a reflection of me standing, flailing behind this tripod, getting very excited. She said, that's what this is all about. It's about you've etched yourself in their souls. And I think perhaps that's what it's about. My identity is the whole of my life looking, trying to communicate with these people. And whilst I've started trying to communicate with them, letting them see me, I'm now showing them to you, showing them in all their glory and all their iconography and in all their true power. And you are going to be, or some of you already are, some of the most intelligent people of this land. Use that intelligence, use that study and knowledge to ask questions which I perhaps am not academically capable of, what these people could mean to you. And I hope some of these pictures have etched something in your soul too. Thank you for having me here today.